What's up, everybody, and welcome to Justin versus the Future. I'm Justin, founder and CEO of You Only Virtual, or You've Inc. I don't know what episode this is, but joining me today, Roberta Valesso, our producer extraordinaire. She missed an episode. Big family drama, internal family drama. We've resolved it. We've moved past it. We've grown. We've taken roads less traveled because everybody here at the Justin versus the Future and You family is mature, positive, focused, and other descriptors that are very, very good and show mental stability. Whatever. No, we're excited to have her back. Like I said, I don't know what exact episode this is. We've been kind of going into like a natural season. We did 5 episodes. We released them. We were really consistent with it. And then the holidays happened. And unfortunately, for those of you who don't know me on a personal level, but do know that the whole reason I started You've and got into the AI space was because my mom was battling cancer. And unfortunately, back in October, she passed away. So that definitely threw a wrench in the Justin versus the Future podcast. And this episode is dedicated to her. It's my first episode back. So check it out. Today, we're going to be talking about something that I find incredibly interesting. And it's something that my company touches on as well, obviously, which is loneliness and artificial intelligence. And what I mean by that is that as more and more software and more technology and future tech on the horizon comes out that's addressing human emotions using tech and using algorithms, and of course, ChatGPT 3, which I believe is the iteration of ChatGPT out right now, has been making tons of waves, as well as things like Replica and other similar products, and then ours, You Only Virtual. So buckle in. It's going to be interesting. We're going to be focusing on loneliness, though, specifically, as well as some other emotions that come. But I think loneliness is really interesting, and especially how technology can address that. So here we go. Undisclosed episode number, but you'll know by looking down below and seeing what episode number this is. And join us now for a brand new episode in a brand new year, 2023, of Justin versus the Future. Okay, welcome, Justin versus the Future. I'm Justin Harrison, founder and CEO of You Only Virtual. Joining me is Roberta Valesso, our producer. Today, we're talking about loneliness and AI. And I haven't come up with a clever title yet, which we were pretty good about season 1, what we're calling the first 5 episodes. Season 1, we were really good about real clever titles. So we're going to have to put our thinking caps on for this. Good news for you if you have been listening and you are digging what we're doing. We are going to put out another batch of 5 sequentially over a couple of weeks, maybe more. We'll see. It was a chaotic end to 22. So our hope is that we'll just be consistent, episode a week. You get to enjoy my insanity and my musings. We'll have some new guests on. I know at one point I said we're only going to do guests, and it just turned out too hard to wrangle people and try to figure out schedules and all that stuff. So with my personal schedule, maybe someday I'll be in a place where I have more time. But for now, when we're able to have a guest, we'll have it. In fact, this season already has 2 guests that have either recorded or will be recording. So there'll be some interesting takes and some interesting folks on here to discuss topics with me. But for today, we're talking about loneliness and artificial intelligence very specifically, but other future techs that could come along and some past technologies that help create more connectivity amongst human beings and help abate loneliness. And I want to talk about the roles, the ethics, the morals, and just sort of dive into what's going on right now and what we should be expecting in the future when it comes to loneliness for human beings and technology sort of filling in that gap when there's a lack of connection to other people. So right out of the bat, ChatGPT 3 is really popular. We're actually using some of their products as well, part of the OpenAI. Really amazing people over there, really amazing technology that is very much helping to change the way that we think about interactions with artificial intelligence programs and chatbots. And like I said, we are using some of their technology as well, and we have some of our own technology. And there's a lot of us out there that are really pushing hard to, kind of push that Turing test limit, if you will, and make things that are kind of indistinguishable from human beings. I mean, that is absolutely part of our model and what we're looking to do with our technology. And why I think that's important is because humans crave connectivity. We're social creatures. We are tribal. We're looking for connection. It's part of our biological imperative. It's something I've talked about at length about why AI is not something to fear. But the reality is, in modern society, I think more so than in the past, there's real opportunity to be isolated, socially isolated, and not have those kind of interactions with other people. And as we get more and more into a society where you don't have to rely on other people to survive, which I would say, I don't know, Roberta, what you think about this, but I'd say at this point, you don't have to rely on anybody to survive. I mean, you can live in a vacuum at this juncture. Of course, you make the argument that the systems people are using and the technology people use to maintain themselves is powered by people, and that is accurate. But from a social context, you can be alone in your apartment all day, never talk to a human being. I mean, you could go weeks without actually having to talk to another human being, I'd imagine. I'm trying to think, what can't you do, especially post-COVID? I mean, I would say before you'd say, well, people have to go to work and then you have to get to work. But now everybody can work remote, or most people should work remote. That's very elitist of me to say. There's still plenty of occupations that don't allow you to work remote. But there are now tens of millions of people worldwide that are able to work completely in a vacuum. I suppose you have Zoom meetings, so there's some connectivity there for those folks. But there are definitely jobs, you take copywriters or writers in general are a good example. And those particular professions, even prior to remote work and Zoom, you could do in a box. But the point I'm making is that there really is this rabbit hole and this slippery slope of being able to eliminate social interaction at a huge degree like never before. And, I think about everything that I do just from my house and avoid the LA traffic from where I live. I order my groceries through Instacart. Love you. If you want to sponsor this podcast, more than happy to take your money and some free Instacart. Uber Eats I love as well, but I also hate you because somehow I find a way to spend $120 on like dinner, $75 for lunch, and $30 for breakfast. But I'm getting better about that. Roberta, I actually went grocery shopping this week for the first time since I've lived in my new place. I'm addicted to the convenience of delivery, and a lot of people are out there. And you start thinking about like print at home and Amazon, and I just saw that. I don't know if you saw this, Roberta, but DoorDash is now doing postal service, so you can mail things through DoorDash. DoorDash will charge you. They come pick it up. They go deal with the logistics of the post office or DHL or UPS or FedEx or whatever. And you never have to be involved in the process. You literally print out your label and you stick it out there, and a courier comes and grabs it, and they go deal with all the shenanigans for you. And I'm like, wow, that's so convenient. But I'm like, that's crazy. How many more things? I'll give you another example. My laundry, I subscribe to this app called Rinse, wink, wink. One of your earliest subscribers. I fill up a bag with my laundry, and I fill up a separate bag with any dry cleaning. I leave it out on my porch. They come get it. The next day, it's all washed and folded, and they drop it back on my porch. I never talk to anyone. It's all app-based. And I could go on and on and on and on like this. There's relatively few things that I have to show up in person for anymore. I realize like occasionally I'll like check myself. I'll kind of like, I don't know if this happens to you, Roberta, but you'll sort of like look around and be like, when the hell is the last time I drove a car? I'll go a week and be like, I haven't left my home in a week. Now, for me, it's a little bit different. And Roberta as well. We both have live-in partners. We work with people. We have to be in Zoom meetings all the time. And now I am actually making a more concerted effort to like go walk around or go take a hike and see other human beings and things of that nature. Go grocery shopping instead of relying on all the Uber Eats and Instacart. But again, either one of those companies, you want to jump in the mix of Justin versus the future, I'll go straight back to my addiction. Not a problem. Let me know. Find representatives over at Instacart. DoorDash, by the way, I don't use you very often, but if you want to sponsor, I will absolutely turn my back on Uber Eats. You let me know. I'm a mercenary for delivery service. Whoever is ready to sponsor Justin versus the future. And by the way, when I say sponsorship, I'm not talking about dollars. I'm talking about just let me use your products for free, because that's what I spend my money on anyway. we're being real about it. I digress. Loneliness is a real issue in the world we live in. And I think it really spiked in the pandemic. This quarantine was hitting and folks didn't have to go do the normal things. And there's so many single people in our generation, millennial generation, that did, opted to not do the kids and the marriage thing. And folks living alone, which I know many of them, all of a sudden now they're not allowed to go out. So even if they were social butterflies, grocery shopping in the pandemic was a nightmare. The scarcity and all that. I became super reliant on Amazon like I'd never been before. And so it just created this whole world of people being by themselves and not having any reason to go out. And loneliness isn't a new phenomenon. I mean, we look at like the way loneliness or, in just bridging the gap of human connectivity using technology, that's as old as time itself. Maybe not time itself. It's getting at minimum, as soon as we swapped over to like agrarian societies or a huge portion of the population got to agriculture, i.e. they were able to stay in one place, mail basically became a thing because you could know where someone was going to be at. It doesn't work in hunter-gatherer societies. Like if the caribou herd moves, that whole tribe goes. Like you don't know where they're going to be at next Thursday. But once you were planting crops and you had livestock to maintain and you had to stay in the same place, everyone knew where you were going to be at. And so it is early, almost the second that societies were like, cool, we're going to stay put, you started having some form of mail. Now, it's not like what we thought. There wasn't like, the post office per se, but you had people whose jobs it were to courier things. Whether that was information or products or whatever, their whole job and I know what you're saying. Well, yeah, of course, like people would have to like bring their products to market. That's different. There were people whose whole reality was just, hey, I'll bring your shit from point A to point B, including information. And some of that information was, how you doing? How you been? HMU, right? It was a level of connectivity. So even if you were far away from somebody within the, society, or for whatever reason you needed to communicate with somebody in another, community, there were ways to do that. And obviously, as we became more advanced, those ways to do that became more advanced, that courier, that mail, that message. But it was a way to have communications. I mean, you look back in, the Bronze Age, basically, they were sending messages. There were languages. They were, you mostly see it when they're talking about like wars and stuff like that, peace treaties and, big things. And it was probably pretty restricted to, nobility, but it still was a really effective way, like send word to my Duke and, wherever the hell that we're riding at midnight with an army of 20, and you send that out. And it took a long time, but it was certainly faster than walking there yourself or, taking a wagon train full of supplies. You send, the handful of people that work this system whose job it is to keep us communicating. And that was a technology back then. And literally our primary form of long distance communication for thousands of years. Literally thousands of years. We had nothing else. You look at Native American tribes here and indigenous peoples here in the US, and they had smoke signals to message people far away. That's really dope in an ingenious way. All this is to say, the human society has a long relationship with using technology to stay connected. And communication is about a lot of different things besides connectivity. There's a lot of logistical but it is genuinely at its core, it's connectivity. Whether there's a logistic backing behind it or not, to be connected to somebody for survival reasons. Hey, we're sending smoke signals. By the way, the buffaloes are dying, or, watch out for this rival tribe, or whatever you're saying. It's still connectivity, right? You're still communicating with somebody else. I like one of my favorite movies, and this isn't about technology really, but it is about the need for connectivity is Castaway. And it's a surprising movie to bring up on Justin versus the Future, because it's not about technology really. But it is so much illustrating my point about the need for human connectivity. Like Tom Hanks in that film, which by the way, I think he deserved an Oscar for that movie. He was phenomenal. He played opposite of a volleyball. You know the talent that takes as an actor? I'm a director by trade. I don't know how. I mean, they should have got best director for that. I don't know. I think was it Zemeckis? Can you check? See, I think it was Robert Zemeckis that directed that as well. He's done a lot of amazing movies. I think the Tom Hanks Robert Zemeckis train. But all that's to say, in that film, Tom Hanks literally uses a volleyball as a proxy to human connection. It was Robert Zemeckis, student of the game. Not a hard one to get, but Tom Hanks takes an inanimate object like a volleyball and uses it to stay connected in some way. You know, and in the film, his goal is to not go insane. And I think one of the most powerful and interesting sequences in a film that illustrates how badly we need connection and how human beings can get attached to something that is not reciprocal, which will matter later in this podcast. This sequence where Tom Hanks is trying to escape the island on his raft, and Wilson, the volleyball, falls off and starts floating away. And Tom Hanks is screaming, like gut-wrenching. It might as well have been a kid or his best friend. And he has to make the decision of like, do I keep trying to go get this volleyball or do I stay on my raft and get the fuck off this island? I remember I was young when I saw this movie. I remember there's somebody like laughed in the movie theater and I just hated them. I was like, you have no empathy, A, and B, that is just brilliant filmmaking. Because it really illustrates we would all be in that position. Unless you're devoid, unless you're a complete sociopath with no emotional connectivity. His only friend for years at this point had been this inanimate object. And this, by the way, isn't weird. All of us had toys as kids that were our sort of safety thing and, you know, proxies for comfort, right? Why do you think kids take a blankie or a teddy bear or something else like that to bed? It's because they're away from their parents and they need something to feel connected to. It's all about connectivity. And objects and technology and things separate from other human beings have been used for this purpose as a proxy in the absence of connection with other humans for as long as humans have been around. So now, you know, flash forward to 2023, and really a lot of these stories started breaking in 22. But we've got a lot of wild technology out there, ourselves included. You've is out there. There's a reason why there's documentaries and news stories being made about us. We get it. We're very different in what we're doing, but we're just one small example. And I think probably one of the most frustrating things in the world for me is when, you know, people are like, that's so strange, or that's so weird, or I don't get it, or that's creepy. It's like, hey, nothing new here. There's nothing new here about what we're doing. We use technology to stay connected, and for all reasons. I mean, just keep going up the human, you know, the ladder of humanity using technology. You know, smoke signals, mail, ravens. I don't know if they did. I wonder if I think they actually use ravens in medieval times, but certainly on Game of Thrones, which is now my historical reference for all things medieval England. Just if it was on Game of Thrones, it probably happened in feudal England. That's accurate. I think about technology in terms of keeping humans connected, and I think, you know, starting at the telegram, you know, in the telegraph machine, how incredible that was for people. I mean, that is the pivotal invention, maybe the most important invention outside of the printing press and the concept of printing presses. But honestly, there was a lot of that was the printing press was going to get invented. The telegram or the telegraph machine, the teletype machine, it was just such a fucking game changer. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. Morse code in and of itself is brilliant. You know, the idea that you could take a lantern, and communicate as far as light could see. I mean, that was pretty revolutionary. I mean, that was pretty smart. But, you know, being able to telegram a message through Western Union in days when, like, we were not even on the verge of cars just yet, and trains were just, really beginning to reach like all over the place, you could communicate across the world via a telegram. It was incredible. It was absolutely game changing. It just changed how we could stay connected with each other. Now, it was probably pretty expensive for the average person to use, but it was available. And when you had really big news because you traveled across the country to go strike gold in California, you could send back, hey, found the gold, or didn't, coming home, see you in 3 months, whatever. This was an incredible way of people to stay connected. And it was also incredible for keeping societies connected. But in terms of that loneliness factor, getting back to the idea of loneliness and being in devoid of human connection, imagine what it was like. In fact, you don't have to imagine too much because you see it often. It's my favorite part of Ken Burns documentaries, where they read the soldier's letter. He's like from Chicago and they're down in the Deep South fighting, the Confederacy. And they start, my dearest Jocelyn, it has been 14 weeks and the rebels do not let up on their assault. I miss your hair, blah, 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 blah. Ken Burns does it way better. Actually, he usually gets voice actors. Always with that draw. I don't know why every soldier, by the way, in Ken Burns' documentary has the Southern accent. You notice that? Whenever it's about the Civil War, my dearest Carolyn, but it's like a Union soldier. Where's the Brooklyn guy? Hey, Carolyn, we're beating these Rebs. I don't think people talk like that back then. I hope they didn't. It really ruins the classiness of so many things for me. The point I'm making is that for the history of human beings, whether it was the Pony Express, which was amazing, whether it was trains being able to deliver mail, in a week or two as opposed to months or weeks with the Pony Express. I mean, technology keeps us connected. And prior to what is probably the most mind-blowing invention of all when it came to technology and the biggest game changer in terms of keeping us connected, the telephone, getting words sent to you by somebody else was the way you stay connected. And that's really what we used it for. To talk to people you cared about the most. People certainly weren't spending, multiple dollars back in those days or cents or whatever it came out to be on Western Union to get news or anything like that. If you went out to do that, it was to talk to somebody you really cared about. It was really meaningful. And then the telephone comes along. And the telephone is amazing because I think there's something so much more connective about hearing somebody's voice. I mean, that's really them. Even with it, I would say we're pretty adapted to text messages at this point. But could you imagine, Roberta, could you imagine what it was like to have the first telephone call? Like they're in New York, I'm in San Francisco, I pick up the phone and now I'm hearing their voice that I haven't heard in 6 months, a year. And it's really them. I bet you so many people asked questions to make sure this wasn't fake somehow. People's mind had to have been blown. Of all the crazy things I've seen as a millennial, sort of bridging the gap between analog and digital, the invention of the phone must have been crazy. But it was the most exciting thing about it had to be, because if it was people calling about your extended wagon coverage, nobody would have gave a fuck. You're like, oh, cool. It's like the most annoying, Victrola. I think it was what they called record players at first, Victrolas. I want to say that's right. But it was amazing because you could talk to people that mattered to you, that you couldn't speak to before. It was amazing. It was amazing. And whole new ways of human beings bridging the gap of connectivity using the telephones sprang up. So a lot of the stuff that we're grappling with now about what's real, what's not real, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I have to imagine that, in the advent of the telephone and as we went, there were people who had long distance relationships who only spoke via phone and letters and things of that nature. They didn't have FaceTime or Skype. They didn't have chat rooms they could be in. They didn't have, text messages. They couldn't send Instagrams. They couldn't do live streams. What they had was the phone. And I know for a fact, many people, fell in love, had full relationships for years that were just based on phones and letters. It's a real thing. And that's not as real as meeting somebody in your village and marrying them and making babies. But that was a reality for lots of people. And I'm sure many of whom never actually met. Okay, so flash forward to the internet age. And now every single person my age knows about this, especially those of us who are teenagers right at the peak of AOL. Okay. Chat rooms and having internet boyfriends and girlfriends was a real fucking thing. You like meet somebody. Remember this one, Roberta? A/S/L. Is that right? Age, sex, location. Yeah. Age, sex, location. A/S/L. That was like a real thing. And then for me, if it was like 13, because I was like 13, female, yes, okay. Location didn't really matter, to be honest. Did not matter. But same age, different gender, boom. Let's get this chat going. And it was really, that's so quintessential. I had an internet girlfriend. We mailed each other pictures, and this was prior to Skype, right? So we never actually saw each other. We had to, and prior to digital photos too. This is right at the advent of AOL. I don't think you could scan photos right at that time when I was like 13. So me and some other middle schooler met each other, chatted. Then we started talking on the phone, which, by the way, was really prohibitive to carry a relationship on like that long distance, because I think she lived on the Midwest or some shit like that. I was on the West Coast. And we connected. So instead of me meeting somebody at my middle school or her meeting somebody at her middle school, we met each other online, had this complete connectivity. So instead of this like going to a middle school dance together or talking after school or walking home from school, we get home from school, log in, type to each other, maybe talk on the phone if our parents would let us, and mailed stuff to each other. And for the life of me, I can't remember her name. I cannot remember what this girl's name was. But I remember my parents thinking it was weird. I remember it being a strange thing. Now it's like par for the course. I mean, literally, we meet everybody online, especially romantically. Dating apps have proliferated. It's changed the way we've gone out and socialized. All of these tweaks, by the way, they're leading up to where we're at now. We've cut out the middleman in human connectivity and the middleman in the effort it takes to be connected in such a massive way. You don't have to I remember like singles bars in the 90s, people would talk about, the grownups would talk about that. By the time I was, a functioning adult, there were so many online options for meeting people that was just gone. Like singles cruises and singles I remember that. You remember that, Roberta? I don't know if you guys had that in Brazil, but like singles event, because it was so difficult to figure out who was single and where they're. Now you literally at the palm of your hand, you've got everybody single in a city you're in, right? So in some theories, by some logic, it should be easier to connect with humans. But I think it actually in some ways makes it harder to connect with humans. Because if you're striking out and you don't know how to do it, here's the upside of going to like a singles bar. Pre-Bumble, pre-Tinder, pre-all this shit. The upside of going to singles events is you're at least going to meet other people. You're going to have conversations. You're going to go out. You're going to have a drink. Maybe you meet another person, that you're not interested in romantically, but you become friends. You're forced to go out and interact with people, right? If you just keep going to the well of Tinder and Bumble and Match.com or whatever else you're doing, you could go a really long time without talking or matching with somebody. So again, even though we're in the thought process that there's like more chance to connect, there's actually less. And I would say actually the thing for social media, right? So past chat rooms, getting back into the internet of how technology keeps us connected, you take social media and again, you make the argument, wow, that's a way for me to stay connected to even more people. And I would say for a lot of us, it is, right? I mean, for me, it's like, I was never going to talk to probably 99.9% of the people I graduated high school with. Now there's like 20 or 30 of them I'm connected with on social media. And some of them are really cool. And I don't think we have any plans on being more than Facebook friends or following each other on Instagram, but it's cool to see what's going on with them. It's nice. And it makes me feel connected to a broader community. coffee sip for people that are listening and not watching. But I think social media actually has the opportunity to really isolate people. And I'll explain why. I think that a lot of the people that I think are suffering from loneliness, there's some issues there with their social skills. And I think that one of the challenges, and I don't ever want to say problem with technology because technology really will fix this issue as well. But I think one of the issues with the ability for people to continue to isolate, especially socially. I think there's a lot of people out there that can get their shit together when they show up at a job because they understand they need to make money. But when it comes to social environments, they just can't figure it out. But one of the problems with social media in terms of creating isolation for folks, as I see it, is a lot of people who are already socially inept or struggle socially or hold odd views or just don't know how to articulate themselves well in written word. I mean, talk about a new kind of pressure. If you just weren't good at articulating in written word, but you could figure it out in person, or you needed to re-explain yourself, social media can really trash your ability to connect with people. Or you have an anger issue and you're like, you know what? I fucking hate this thing and that thing. And you know what? I think House of Dragons is actually a piece of shit and I hate watching it, right? And you post that, you've just said that to everyone you know. As opposed to, you get drunk in a group of friends, you say a couple things, you got some apologies to make the next day. Now you've just unilaterally pissed off everybody for the most part in your social circle. It carries a lot more consequence. People don't think about the fact that, that is one of the challenging things I find about social media, even though it's amazing for keeping me connected. Like, I don't need to worry about pissing off somebody I was, in high school with 20 years ago when I hang out with my friends in LA. I'm never going to see these people ever. Now I do. And to some degree, it's fantastic. It makes me a more accountable person. I think despite what people say, one of the things I hate, Roberta, when we talk about how connected all human beings are, people say people live in these echo chambers on social media. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? An echo chamber is living in the same Midwestern Southern town that never gets any new residents and everybody's related by some degree. There's 4 families that run the whole place. You never travel. You never went to that's a fucking echo chamber. That is a massive echo chamber. Every conversation you have is coming from the perspective of this one place. Social media really broadens that for you. And for people that are self-aware, which not everybody is, by the way, it actually creates an opportunity for you to think through how you interact with a much broader group of people. But if you are not self-aware or you haven't figured out all the social dynamics, and I think it's really tragic when you see young people start to become pariahs on social media, you can isolate yourself really fucking quick. Really quick. And so I think in some regards, like, overwhelmingly, all the technology I'm describing is positive, and we shouldn't get rid of it because there are some people that just can't figure it out. By the way, those people also weren't figuring it out in real life either. But I think that there was more interactions to be had. Going to the grocery store, going into the office. But now you're sitting home alone. You can't figure out how to make friends on social media. Oh, and by the way, that translates over to dating apps. You're in your mid-20s or you're in your early 30s and you've been by yourself. This is much more unnatural than connecting with technology. In fact, this is much more unhealthy, I would imagine, than connecting with Wilson, the volleyball. For somebody to feel completely alone in the world is not only sad and tragic, it can also be dangerous, as we're finding out. We're seeing this huge uptick in really radicalized people. And I will say, I don't want to generalize, but there is this huge influx of people called incels. These are people that are called incels, and it stands for involuntarily celibate. And really, when I read and hear the stories about these young men, it's a case of loneliness, and then they're being radicalized by predators, essentially, who are taking advantage of this loneliness, which in turn is spurring mental health issues. And then they're getting radicalized, and then it's becoming other people's fault. And then some of them are now acting out violently as a result of that. And it's scary and it's dangerous. And it's especially dangerous because I think in the past, the sort of vision of the old hermit that wants to go live in a cabin, or, the really socially awkward person, or the weird cat lady, or the sort of tropes we used to think about people who are lonely, where there was, absolutely sad things. And I think the technology, as we continue talking about it, could really help connect them. And I imagine a lot of that has been helped. My mom wasn't really able to go out on her own towards the last 3-4 years of her life. She had such a broad network of friends thanks to social media. And I think some of the more traditional people that we see as being lonely, I think they found those, whether it's gaming communities or whatever. But I think the incel thing really ties into loneliness at the core, what I think becomes dangerous, or it's easy to prey on people. It's easy to take advantage of people. And we've seen this, lonely people. I think one of the first things, and by the way, I'm sure there was tons of examples, other examples I'm just not aware of. But in my childhood, one of the most famous loneliness cures or resolutions using technology was dirty phone lines, 1-900 numbers. You call this and you get a thrill, and they had like group chats and all this other weird stuff. But this was like technology bridging that gap of romantic loneliness is really what I'm getting to. Is a huge thing. Romantic loneliness is a huge thing. And it doesn't have to just be like incels and these like young socially awkward men that aren't figuring it out in the dating world. There are also like widows and widowers who just don't want to move on, don't want to go out and meet all brand new people and go through that rigmarole. So it brings me to the first technology that I think is a little bit controversial right now. And it's interesting the direction they're going, but it's a product called Replica. And Replica really is choosing their lane. I will say they're not, it doesn't seem like they're really pushing the connectivity button on this. And I think that might be backfiring on them a little bit. But their product is basically like a sex bot that messages you, has a personality. And the controversy right now is that people that are buying into it are actually getting sexually harassed by their own replicas. Now, I personally am wondering if this is like another case of Russian shenanigans, where they're trying to the Russians and shenanigans, man. The technology, they have a headquarters in San Francisco and in Moscow, and that always makes me raise an eyebrow, because I think it was the Russians that pulled that crap where, like, maybe 2017 they had that you had this app where you could take a picture of yourself and it would show you what you looked like in 20 years, and they would age down, like, here's what you look like 20 years ago. And I admit, I think I still have those pictures on my Instagram, and I loved it. And then I found out that it was basically like, I want to say Russian, could have been Chinese. Those are usually the culprits when it comes to cyber warfare. I want to say it was one of the two that was basically just banking people's facial images so that they could hack into facial recognition software, because that was like the big new thing on all the cell phones. So I'm not saying Replica is shady. I want to make that leap yet. I'm also raising an eyebrow. Just a can't really do it. I used to do this all the time. I'm raising a little bit of an eyebrow. Anything headquartered in Moscow these days, there's a little skepticism. But all the same, I think it actually plays an important role, at least what they're doing, at least what they're pioneering. You're providing this connection. Now, the thing that we don't talk about with these incel people, right? For people who are not familiar with this community, this sort of like red pill community, and it's basically all these guys. Pretty much everybody's had to have heard of this dude, Andrew Tate, who, by the way, is just preying on impressionable, sad, lonely young men. But really everybody's focused on the fact that these guys aren't getting laid. And even their, the name, they coined the term themselves, incel. It's kind of, I think it was a Reddit thing or a 4chan thing, involuntarily celibate. But what doesn't track for me about that is you can buy a real doll. I remember when I was like 16, 15 years old and I saw that Real Sex episode with real dolls in it on HBO. And as a horny teenager, I was like, that would do it for me if I could afford that. You can make the argument that the majority of people couldn't afford them. They're really expensive. And by the way, another way in which technology was helping bridge the gap with connectivity. But I don't think it's sexual with these guys, because there is really, I mean, those dolls are crazy realistic. And I'm sure there's knockoff versions that are really cheap that could get it. And frankly, the oldest profession in the world. There's ways to get sexual satisfaction. There's endless amounts of porn and whatever. I think what's missing for these people and for millions and millions of people around the world is connectivity. There's only so much pleasure to be derived from meaningless sex. There's only so much release you can get when you don't feel like somebody else or something else was interested in doing it with you. Or more importantly, having that connection. I know people, I myself was one of them. I met somebody online and we connected, and for all kinds of crazy circumstances, we weren't able to meet quickly. And we built a whole relationship over the phone and FaceTime and chatting and texting and sending each other videos and all this other stuff. And I didn't feel the need to be sexual with anybody else through a very long period of time because I had that connection. So, the phone sex or the chatting sex or the FaceTiming sex or all those things people can get. There's OnlyFans and cams and porn. There's all kinds of shit for people to have this sexual release. Yet you still have this massive movement of people that are angry and lonely and checked out. It has nothing to do with the sex. It really doesn't. It's connection. And I think that's where Replica's going wrong right now, is they're focusing just on a dirty bot. Well, there's cam girls and what is it called? OnlyFans, and all this other kind of shit where you can get that, going back to the 90s, the 900 number. You call up and, oh, baby, you have the sexiest voice in the world, blah, 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 whatever they said, right? You had these things. That's not what people are fundamentally missing. It's the connectivity. That's what's missing. And so I think what we're doing at You, for instance, and this is something we're looking at, and we actually, within our technology, we're looking at building relational personas that people can subscribe to and interact with and have that connection with somebody. And I think there's something there that's so important that Replica's really missing the bar on. I think that movie Her is a great example. It's somebody that's so lonely. And you see this relationship being built. We're there already, by the way. That's not science fiction anymore. I'm sure there are thousands of men and women that are in love with their replica. There are thousands of people that are in love with, CGI anime characters. There are thousands of people that are in love with inanimate technology. This is not new. There are people that are in love with bodybuilding. I mean, people are craving that that connectivity. And I think it's going to become pervasive. And I also don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. I'm the inventor of a type of AI virtual personality, of personas. I make personas. I made a persona of my mom so I could stay connected to her. I have no desire to have an artificial intelligent girlfriend, to use a system of artificial intelligence to have a girlfriend. Why? Well, because I have a human girlfriend. And I know how to, meet and connect with other people if that one doesn't work out, and that it's fine. There's a system, I know the system. But for people who don't, what do? What are they supposed to do? And is it wrong? And I know what a lot of people are going to throw back at me, oh, they need to go get therapy and they need to figure out how to socialize and they need to figure out that's not an option for everybody. Therapy is expensive. Some people have things going on, cognitive things happening where they're never going to like learn to be, past a baseline of social. There's going to be an ineptitude there always because they just don't get it or it doesn't connect or whatever. The amazing thing about AI technology and thinking about virtual personalities to connect with folks like this is that the way that the virtual personality is going to evolve is going to be based on how you interact with it. So imagine this person that just says the wrong things at all times, has the weirdest, most bizarre out there ideas to most normal people, interacting with this virtual match that is just slowly becoming the perfect match for them. I think that's amazing. I think that's an incredible gift to give to people who are unable to connect with other people. If you look at so many of some of the more scary crimes that are pervasive in our society now, mass shootings, the crazy, behavior of some of these young men I mentioned before, and I'm really trying hard. I'm really trying hard now not to offend people, but there's a lot of bad shit that comes with loneliness. Because it's not just about loneliness, right? I think that's the thing. It's like, oh yeah, there's people who are lonely that never have done anything wrong in their life and they don't deserve to be lonely, right? But I think when you're out, even in an echo chamber, even there's two ways you can go when you're lonely. You either shut down and kind of accept it, which I think is something that's easier for older folks to do. Like for me at 40, I don't have that antsiness of feeling like I need to socialize with tons of people anymore. And I imagine that only I've done it. I've had my experiences. I went to school. I've worked at jobs. I've met new people. I have my circle of friends. I can talk to them once a month, whatever. For young people who are still trying to build those networks, it's a lot different to not have connectivity. And I think there's a lot of criminality and a lot of scary things happening. I think for older folks, whereas it's sad and it's tragic if you're alone, it's just a little bit different than when you're starting your life out like this. And I think what happens is people find community somehow. They find access to communities and they become radicalized. And I think if instead we were able to let them connect with a piece of AI, who cares? Who cares? How is it hurting anybody? I get really frustrated with the sort of I'm a big Redditor. I do a lot of Redditing. I get really frustrated with Reddit because a lot of times, these incel guys or these red pill people are just young kids, and we do this confirmation bias with them of being like, you're a creep, you're a weirdo. It's like, no, they're fucking awkward. They're awkward. They haven't figured it out yet. I grew up with a million kids like that. I was an awkward teenager for a while. I used to wear a black trench coat and paint my fingernails black before this was in vogue, by the way. Me and my friends would wear dresses to school for us, it was, it was an expression. It was about shocking people. It was about not being part of the mainstream, right? We were being outliers. And that made us awkward for the day. That made other kids not want to hang out with us, right? We found our little tribe of weirdos and did our weirdo thing, right? And then, most of us grew out of it and, kind of found other tribes and did our other things or whatever. But some of them didn't, and fortunately I grew up in the Bay Area, right? So, you could find your tribe someplace. There was pretty much every tribe there. So, my friends that stayed in that sort of gothy or punk or whatever, they make their way to Berkeley or whatever, they could find another tribe, not everybody has that. And not everybody grows up in a place where you can be weird like that. Right. And I knew a lot of socially awkward kids whom just sort of faked it till they made it. And it was really pre-internet, I can go into a whole community of other people that are just not fitting in. and run with that, right? So a lot of them actually did go. I know at least two people who were just so socially awkward and so lonely. They had serious mental health issues coming out of that. And so now you take millions upon millions of people like that and you put them into groups and on Instagram, and you have like a dude like Andrew Tate who's, standing next to, the most beautiful women these guys have ever seen coming out of, Tulsa, Oklahoma, or wherever they're from, saying, here's what you got to do to meet women. It's not your fault. And then starts espousing all kinds of stuff that is incredibly damaging to both women and these young men, because you're creating a whole group of people that believe a bunch of like absolutely vile horseshit and not learning anything really, because it doesn't work. None of these dudes who are doing like, and it's not just Andrew Tate. There's so many of these guys. Here's how you get girls. It started with those jackasses that did the, what was that book called? The Game. I don't think the actual author of The Game, by the way, was a pickup artist. I think he was like documenting the guys who did pickup artistry. But those are that's where I remember it really getting going. I wrote a dating book, Roberta. And the whole point of my dating book was the opposite of the whole like pickup artist and, dominant male shit. It was like, hey, find something you're confident about yourself. Stop feeling shitty that you're a little bit different. Great. If you're a gamer, be a gamer. Be the best gamer. Go find people who will be impressed, because a lot of people will be, that you're ranked in whatever percent. It was about like figure yourself out, and here's how to enhance yourself and feel good about yourself. It wasn't about breaking other people down or reverting to the 1950s and sending women back into the kitchen. But if you're 19 years old or 18 years old and you were socially awkward throughout middle school and throughout high school, and you get out into the world and now you're expected to be something of an adult, and you never had sex before, and you cannot figure out for the life of you how to fucking figure that out in a meaningful way, because again, it's not about the actual sex. There's so much ritual involved with sex, and especially around like your first experiences, right? We're taught this in movies. You meet the first person and you have a crush, and then you start, and it's a buildup, and it's a reciprocal thing. There's a reason why, like, the sex industry stays relatively stable, because it's being utilized mostly by people who are like, yeah, I have sex, but tonight I just want to take it easy, or I'm lazy, or I'm, want to cheat on somebody, whatever it is, right? It's not flourishing from these young people, because what they're really craving is connectivity. What if you put an artificial intelligence program that can connect with them, where they can get to know each other, where they can go through those motions, where there can be sexuality involved, where they can progress the relationship, but they can do it on their terms, how they are. Because it's crazy to think that you're just going to change everybody. It's crazy to think that everybody's going to be, fitting in with whatever the normative, lane that they're at is. And if they were able to do that, they would have. There's a reason why it's called involuntary celibacy, right? A lot of these people aren't going to change. Well, what do you do with them? There's two things that can happen. One, like, we can figure something out that occupies them, that gives them that experience, and continuing to rely on technology to help solve problems. Modern problems require modern solutions. Or we can let somebody else, like the Andrew Tates of the world, deal with it. Radicalize a generation of young men into believing things that we've spent the last 70, 80 years trying to undo. It's really crazy to me. So you have something like Replica, and you have all these people pushing against it, and all these people talking about it not being normal. And I'm like, dude, support it. Support us like you've, like, we need to figure out loneliness, because loneliness is actually becoming a dangerous thing, is the ultimate point. I don't think loneliness is just tragic, which it is. And there's nothing more tragic to me than an elderly person who's lost their partner and now they're by themselves. That's what our company does. That's what I'm passionate about, is connecting people who've lost somebody or whatever. But there's this whole other niche of people out there who haven't been able to connect with somebody. And what do we do with them? What do we do for them? And I really think it's time to stop attacking them. Absolutely attack the fucking predators that are radicalizing these young people, and put something technological in there that can fill this void. The people only have so many formative years, I think, before there's some real long-term damage from being alone and experiencing this type of loneliness. I think a lot of radicalization that you see is on the part of loneliness, or on the part of not feeling that they fit in. I mean, how many people do you know that really want to be in, radicalized religion, or radicalized terror groups, or radicalized, online men's supremacy groups, or whatever the fuck they're called? I think most people want to feel normal. They want to go to their job, or they want to go to school, and then they want to come connect with a partner or a friend. And I think that if we can bring technology that gives that experience to people, I think it's going to cause way more good than it is going to cause harm. I think it's really easier for us to judge technology in general and talk about all the problems that might come from it, or talk about all the things we're worried about, while turning a complete blind eye to the problems that exist right now. Well, what are you going to do? Send a therapist to every chat group, every red pill forum there is out on the internet? To every young person contemplating suicide? It's not just radicalizing them. Suicide is the number one cause of death for, adolescents. Double check me on that, but I believe that's accurate. Loneliness and isolation are an epidemic, and they're not a new epidemic, but they are getting worse. They're becoming bigger problems. And if there are solutions that can keep people connected, some of them might use the virtual relationships to help springboard them into real relationships. We've been talking about for years at our company developing, personas that are based on, on real people or real personality traits that are more forgiving, basically. So, they don't end the relationship with somebody who's socially awkward, but create boundaries and interact with them and whatever else. I mean, somebody could engage with that for a certain amount of time and then go, okay, I'm shutting it down. I'm canceling my subscription. I'm ready to get back on Bumble because I feel like now I know how to talk to people. I mean, ultimately, technology as a way to connect people is a concept as old as technology. I mean, it really is. It's what we use some of the first technology for. Outside of, food preparation and moving things and logistics, I mean, technology was always used for connecting humans. And I think it's paramount that we continue to build out technology that can give people the sense of connectivity, because we are social creatures and there are people that are really isolated for a multitude of reasons. So despite my opinions about Replica and where what might be going on, and by the way, what is her name, Roberta, again? Eugenia? I'll say it was Eugenia. I try to get, the reason I know they're based in Moscow is because I try to get a hold, because I do think they're doing really cool stuff. I think there's a chance to connect. So if you are happening to listen, lady from Replica, we'd love to talk. One founder to another, one AI founder to another. But just fair warning, I'm not doing anything anti-American with my technology. So I'm not saying that's what you're about. I'm from the Bay Area. Roberta's from San Francisco. So my hope is it's all a coincidence. I'm kidding, of course. But I would say now is a good time to be able to razz Russians. I'm sorry. It's just it's only fair in technology and in the world. I digress. I would like to see a world where, again, I've become more and more apolitical in terms of, parties here in the United States and this thing and that thing. I see a world that has a lot of problems, and I see a lot of talking about them and I see a lot of demonizing of people that are experiencing those problems, and I see a lot of finger pointing from one side to the other. And what I see is a lack of tangible solutions. And in the society we live in now, there is almost nothing that can't be solved with technology. And loneliness and social isolation is one that's really easy. And there's lots of programs out there, and there's lots of ways to connect people. And we should absolutely, through the best of our ability, be striving to create that option for people who are lonely, as well as every other problem we have. This was an interesting one. I really like it, and I do hope the folks at Replica get a hold of me. I do want to talk to them. I think hopefully they're doing God's work like we are. We want to help people is the end game. I'm really glad to be back. I'm really happy with this episode. I think this is a fun topic. Please like, subscribe, comment, send me a raven with a note telling me how to change it. I will always respond to anybody that says anything. Keep downloading and checking us out. If there's future tech that you don't know about that you like us to talk about, or get on topics, or there's a hot button issue I'm not talking about, let me know. I'm always game to talk about new stuff. But for now, keep tuning in. Thank you so much for your support. Sorry for the long layoff, but we're back, and keep listening to Justin versus the Future.